markets are going to be forced to change more rapidly?
Okay. Wireless is probably the segment of the business that I'm personally most comfortable with at the moment. Again, for this reason that people always have these things with them. People are increasingly highly reliant on them, and they're really fun. Okay, that's the other thing about communications. Typically, you wouldn't describe communications as fun, right? Even in the good days, we wouldn't say it's fun. It's useful, but it's not fun. The thing about mobiles is they are fun. People personalize them, you play with them, you can do all kinds of things with them besides work, right? That's very important. So the wireless guys are in the best place. The Tier 1 carriers, I'm convinced, are going to do quite well. It's a scale business. You've got pipes, and I spoke earlier about thinking dumb pipes are a good thing. An essential part of the entire delivery chain for just about any service now is the pipes. So if we build good pipes, and we're reasonable about how we price the access to them, and we start adding in new features to those pipes, they're very valuable. And this is a sort of B-school exercise, but you ask people in the room, for example, if you are a carrier, you run a network, you're billing for services, what's your core competency? And you can only give me one core competency. Don't say, well, there's 7 things. No, you haven't thought it through. What is the one unique thing you've got which makes you totally different than all the other parts of the value chain, and in fact all other contenders in the market, right? Pipes, big pipes. It's a core competency. The only thing that even gets close to pipes as a core competency is command of the regulatory environment, right? And you can get a legitimate argument about that. All Tier 1 carriers are very good at understanding regulators control your business model. One way or the other, they always do. Capital markets are important, but fundamentally, the government decides whether you can be in business or not. That's a huge, huge impact on your business model, and it's a jump ball right now, right? You're getting different regulatory regimes, different parts of the world, but the reason, and I used to wonder about this, being a cable guy, why did telcos spend so much money on regulatory and attorneys and that sort of thing? Business model. Whether you can be in business, who your competition is, can you set your own rates? All determined by the regulatory process, right? Which is why regulatory process is a very close second, in my opinion, to the fact that you actually own networks as being a core competitive advantage. Now, if you look at most countries, I'll use the US for an example, if you were to ask any buyer of communications just about anywhere in the United States, from whom can you get high-speed access, 2 names are going to come up generically, right? Telco, cable, right? People are going to say, well, okay, if I'm talking wireless, all right, now there may be 3 or 4 names that could come up. But for the core tethered broadband service, only 2 kinds of organizations can give you nationwide coverage. It's not just one company, it's the function. It can only be provided by 2 people. That's a core competency. Because if I'm a CLEC, I'm not going to do that. I can't afford to replicate that old network, right? So I'm not going to do it. If I'm a Google, I don't want to do it. So one of the enduring assets that every communications carrier will have is that core network. And it's really a mistake to denigrate it by calling it a dumb pipe. It's essential to your business. It's the foundation of your business, and it always will be. So Serena and I have these arguments from time, not arguments, discussions about where the revenue is going to come from in terms of volume and composition. And there's a sense that things like advertising and video and so on and so forth are going to be the bulk, which is called the bulk, of carrier revenue at some date in the future, right? And I may be wrong about this, but I'm still maintaining that the day I die, most of our money is going to be made by charging people access to services and pipe that we provide for some kind of monthly fee. I just don't see any way that's going to change. The money's too large. You're talking nearly $2 trillion of revenue, and you lay that against all the advertising, what you think you're going to make from offering video services, all the rest of that stuff put together, you're going to have a hard time coming up with numbers anywhere as close to being that big, right? And again, I might be wrong about this, but do not neglect the pipes. Pipes are very important, even dumb pipe. Though you want to do other things than dumb pipe, that's the foundation of your business. Do not neglect that. Other questions?
Somebody asked a question about the iPhone and how it's changing AT&T's business model. And you made a really good point about creating an emotional bond with what you sell. But the question is AT&T really selling the iPhone, or is the bond being made between me and Apple? And so the follow-up question is, and if that's the case, and if all AT&T is doing is subsidizing creation of that bond between me and Apple, then the real winner is probably Apple. And the second is services from the cloud. If AT&T can leverage that emotional bond, that investment in those subsidies, and offer services that are now attached to my iPhone, that's the business model probably that, for a service provider at least, makes sense.
And so the answer to your question is yes, yes, and yes.
So your thoughts.
The problem with the analogy that I brought up about iPhone is in fact precisely the point that the emotional bond is end user and device. Right? But that's the closest we've ever gotten. I'm not saying we stop there, but that's the closest we've ever gotten to anything that a person could love about communications, because nobody loves the bit stream. Right? So strategically, what does AT&T do? Cloud computing and applications in the cloud with all kinds of partners, right? We have a problem in the communications business that, wasn't invented here, so we don't do it. Well, it's a recipe for disaster. Nobody anymore thinks you can do it that way. Everybody understands the need for partners. We need reasonable business arrangements, reasonable rates of return for all the parties that are involved, and that's just a matter of sitting down and who's got more power or who thinks they have more power. You negotiate what advantage you can, but then you sign the document. You have to do that, right? So I don't know exactly where it's going. Some of this is open-ended. I don't actually know all the answers, but I do know one of the things is applications are really what the business is about now. Even though the pipes are the foundation of the business, everything's about applications, everything. And we need to get a lot better at that, and we will. I'm confident we will get better at it. The fact that I don't have to tell people to do this anymore means we're someplace we didn't used to be. Everybody gets it. The only issue is how do you tactically implement that.
With your background in cable and the talk about wireless as the future, any thoughts on how cable converges into wireless? There's the Clearwire Sprint transaction involved a number of cable companies, and I know that they're searching for ways to get into that market.
Mm-hmm. There are two answers to that question. One of them is helpful for telcos, the other one probably less helpful. The less helpful answer is cable is very well aware that without a quadruple play, they're not going to be competitive. So they will find a way to get into the wireless business. You can rest assured of that. Clearwire appears to be one of the ways, but the cable guys have been in wireless for well over 2 decades already. I mean, they owned part of the spectrum that Sprint actually was offering for PCS. Right? So they've been financial players for a while. They've been watching it. But cable guys, the thing that is helpful for a telco is cable guys always will tell you they don't like providing services over somebody else's network. You don't have the control, you don't have the margin. So they're going to be very careful about how they get into wireless. I absolutely agree they're going to get into wireless because they have to. But again, they're going to be a little bit more hesitant than they would about rolling out any new service on their wired network because they just don't like the idea of being on somebody else's network. It's just a cultural thing that you can't explain. That's the way that they are. But they will be in it. Absolutely. Now, interestingly enough, with the Clearwire deal, some people think the important thing about cable operators and Google to a lesser extent being involved in Clearwire is the 4G network. I don't think that's the case. And again, I may be wrong about this. I think the really important thing is that the cable partners in Clearwire have the right to sell every single 3G feature, the current features of the mobile network, right? That means voice, that means some amount of mobile broadband, and the services that are attached to that. That probably is more important immediate because cable guys are very, very focused on immediate cash flow. They don't like to wait 5 years to get a payback. So what they're going to start doing, this is my guess, is they're going to pound away on basically stealing market share from people who have the customers now. And that's going to be more important than the 4G because 4G is sort of ethereal. In the future, we don't like to do those things. I want revenue right now, quarterly earnings, got to show it. So what's the easiest way to do that? I'm going to steal somebody else's market share. And they're very good at it, obviously, right? What's cable?